Hi there, folks. Welcome to the channel. Hope you're doing well today. Before you listen to this story, I want to mention there's another one on my channel. It's called Letting James Leave Neverland. It's not that these two are a part one and part two, but they do tie together. You could really listen to them in either order, and they would still make perfect sense. But the author, Isaiah It Ain't So, wrote them in that order. She did Letting James Leave Neverland first, but regardless of the order in which you listen to them, I believe you will enjoy both of them. But I just want to take a moment before we start to thank the author, Isaiah It Ain't So, for allowing me to share these stories with you. Let's begin tonight's story, shall we? My first imaginary friend was Michelangelo. He was a green dog. If I remember correctly, he had puppies at some point. My next imaginary friend was called Tom the horse. We were friends for about a day, and then Tom fell off the back of a truck and died. I was devastated, and when my mom told me about his passing, I cried pretty hard. I was 4. I met my aunts when I was 7. Were they related to me? I don't think so, but my father called them my aunts, the 3 of them, Mary, Jane, and Delilah. We took night walks, the aunts and I, but I wasn't brave at night, and the things that might be lurking in the dark made me anxious, so Aunt Mary told me we could do something that would make me the queen of monsters. She would ask me, "What's the scariest thing that could drop out of that willow tree?" "A scary man," I would answer, "with great big yellow teeth, and green slime dripping from his mouth, long fingernails, and a big knife." "Is he hungry?" she would ask. "Very hungry," I would say. "Does he eat kids?" "Oh, yes, little girls like me, and aunties like you." "He is scary," she would agree, and we would keep walking. "Tell him to guard the tree." "Guard the tree, scary man." He would slink off and climb high into the branches, waiting, watching, hungry. "What's the scariest thing that could come out of the lake?" she would ask. "A moose that walks wrong. His legs bend upside down so he looks like a crab. He has big, white, rotten eyes, and he makes a clicking sound from his mouth. He has very sharp teeth going all the way back in his mouth, and his tongue hangs out like a wolf. His feet are just bones, and so is his head. His eyes roll around on his head because he's looking for me, but his head is upside down and he can't turn it all the way over." "That is an excellent monster," she would tell me. "That is your best one yet. Is he the scariest monster you can imagine?" He was. None are scarier than he. None? Then if he is the scariest monster, the others are scared of him, and you are his queen. You made him, and you can tell him to go to sleep. Go to sleep, backwards moose. His head bobs and his tongue lolls out of his mouth as he makes his way back to the lake. Moss hangs from his antlers. His sharp teeth click and clack as he slips under the water. I see his white eyes glint beneath the surface. He closes them. My monster sleeps. You have created the scariest monster. No others can harm you because if they try, Backwards Boost will come and scare them away. You have nothing to fear. And so we would walk, bolder, braver, protected by me, the queen, and her army of monsters. Next time I saw a monster I was dreaming, and Backwards Moose wasn't a dream. He couldn't save me. It was hard to think of a scarier monster to protect me the first night I experienced sleep paralysis. It was hard to do anything. The Shadow Man walked his fingers up my leg. 1, 2, 1, 2. His claw caught on my blankets, so he shed it and left it bleeding on my hip. He held up the stump to show me. It glowed red hot like the cigarette lighter in my aunt's Oldsmobile. He pressed it to my arm, and my flesh smoked. I was so mad. I was the queen of monsters, and this one was being bad. He was hurting me, so I hurt him back. I imagined I was made of acid, and I seeped into his wound. He pulled his hand away, but I was poisoned, and he couldn't stand me. He screamed and screamed, and I watched him. I was merciless. I couldn't move, but I could hurt him, so I did. All night long he screamed, and I lay there in my bed, singed, satisfied, paralyzed. When the sun rose, so did I. He was gone. I was victorious. When I told my aunts, they congratulated me. Of course I beat the Shadow Man. I was a queen. I had nothing to fear because all monsters bowed to me, and if one stepped out of line, I could punish it. I soon discovered that I could control my dreams. I could change them. I didn't feel paralyzed anymore. But then I met her. I was running from some mummies when I got bored and decided I didn't want to run anymore, so I stopped and I said to them, "You can't see me anymore." They were disappointed and said, "But you're right there." I stamped one foot and I said, "I am invisible and you can't see me anymore." So they ran past me. I was invisible. I was invincible. But when the dust settled, she was there. She wasn't Egyptian. She wasn't a person. She was a drawing, and she was moving. She watched me out of big, empty eye sockets that were deep and dark. She wore a black t-shirt, and on it was a word in big letters, "If." Her black pants had big holes and were cut off at the bottom. She had something underneath her clothes, long sleeves and pants that were torn in strips and fluttered in the wind. They were striped like the clothes bad men wear in jail. She didn't have any hands or feet. She just floated. "I am the queen of monsters," I declared. "So you are," she agreed. "You can't hurt me." "I could if I wanted to," she replied. If she didn't listen to me, then I would hurt her, I decided. "You can't hurt me," she said, and she smiled. Her teeth were small and sharp. There were rows and rows of them, like a shark. They were very white, like her skin and her hair and the letters on her shirt. "I'm going to wake up now," I announced. But I didn't. Her smile got bigger and bigger, and her teeth multiplied to fill the dark spaces. "I am going to wake up now," I shouted. But I didn't. The sand began to shift and slide beneath my feet, running like a rough, dry river flowing past me. It started to get dark, and as angry as I was, I couldn't burn her. I closed my eyes to the sting of the sand, rising and whipping and scratching at me. "I want to wake up," I screamed, but I didn't. When I opened my eyes, I was in a dark place. Not a room, just a place. There was no ceiling and no sky, just a place. She was there. "As long as you don't try to hurt me, I won't hurt you," she told me. "Leave me alone," I said, angry, afraid. "Would you like to wake up now?" she asked me. I nodded my head, and I did. My mom came and took me away from the aunts a few days later. I hadn't seen her in a while, but I kept what my aunts had taught me, and I kept the monsters I couldn't control. She stayed in my dreams. She kept her promise, and she didn't hurt me. She made other things go away. She wasn't the scariest thing I could imagine. I don't even know if I imagined her. She was just there. The first time I drew a picture of her, I showed my drawings to an older boy because I thought he would think she was cool. He told me I needed to talk to a priest. A priest? Maybe they would think she was cool. It turns out priests don't like monsters, and if you say you see them, you get in trouble. I didn't tell anyone else about her for a long time, but she stayed. When I was 13, I stopped imagining monsters. My family went through a lot, and I learned about stress. Stress is a monster you don't even have to make up. So I coped in my own way. I wrote a scary story about a murderer because I thought it would be cool. My friends asked to be in the story, so I put them in as victims. They each told me how they'd like to die. We thought it was cool. It turns out teachers don't think stories about murderers are cool. I got in a lot of trouble. The stress made me dream about quarries. I hate quarries. One night I dreamed I was walking along the edge of one. There was dark water at the bottom of the quarry, a long way down beneath me. I started to fall. She was there. She pushed me away from the edge with the tips of her sleeves, gently, just enough I didn't lose my balance. I want to wake up now, If girl, I told her. She touched the word on her shirt. She smiled, and I awoke. The last time I saw my aunts, I was 18. I'd run away again, but when you're 18, they stop calling it that, and they just say that you moved out. I came back to the town where they lived. They were fearless, but they were old. I was young and free, and I didn't spend as much time with them as I should have. They were proud of me, and I believe I'd do great things. I left that town again, flew away like a bird. I was free. But the next time I came to that town, they didn't live there anymore. I never heard from them again, but I asked If girl, if they were okay one night while I was dreaming. A spider had begun to make a web at the end of her sleeves, so she sat very still for months on end while it worked. It laid many eggs, and she remained motionless for over a year. No matter what I dreamed, she was there, and she was still. I dreamed about a carnival, and she was there on a Ferris wheel, immobile and silent. When I asked her, she didn't answer me then. The spider died when I was dreaming about riverboats, big grand ones on the river in New Orleans. I was in the hospital. Something bad had happened, and I was under anesthesia. I always dream about riverboats when they put me under anesthesia. She wrapped the spider gently in its final web and stepped over the railing of the boat. She walked slowly down steps I couldn't see on her feet she doesn't have, and set the spider's body in the water. I asked again then. As she walked back up, her steps joined me to look out over the Mississippi. She told me not to ask her that again. I haven't, but I think that means they've died. They seemed very, very old to me when I was 18. The first time I saw If while I was awake, I was in college. I had too much to drink, and I was walking home from a friend's house. I stumbled and tripped as I walked down the sidewalk. It wasn't far, and I wasn't scared, but the scariest thing I could imagine dropping out of a tree, it turns out wasn't a scary man, it was me. I saw myself fall out of a tree at the end of a rope I had tied for myself. I was wearing my clothes, I had done my hair, and I was swaying from a branch of that oak tree, broken and dead, like a forgotten tire swing. I screamed and cried, but nobody came out of their house to help me. I don't even know if anyone heard me. But if I did, when I got home to my dark, empty house, she was there. She stood in the corner behind the dining table my uncle had given me, one of my only pieces of furniture. "Have you had enough?" she asked me. She looked disappointed. She wasn't supposed to show up when I was awake, but awake I was. and she was there. She was standing in my house, and suddenly I was stone cold sober. I thought it meant I was crazy. I thought I was dying. I was in a bad place then with the wrong person, doing stupid things. I didn't want to die like that. I cried so hard. I screamed all night long, clutching my throat and throwing up a lot. She balanced quietly on the edge of my sink and watched me puke. A couple of times she reached down and moved my hair while I threw up, and I cried harder. But she was right. I had had enough of all of it, of everything I was doing. And I wasn't dead. I quit my job the next day and I moved. I packed everything I owned into a U-Haul and I drove away. I don't drink anymore, but she's still here. I can see her as clear as you can see these words. We get along better now, If and I. I consider her a friend. She's even allowed other people to see her since then, but most people don't really appreciate the experience. Because, you see, while I might be a queen of monsters, it turns out there are monsters worse than little old backwards moose. I don't imagine the scariest things anymore. I see them, and they're not mine. I took my first job with the church just before I got engaged. If was there. We took a demon from a drunk tank and handed him over to a pair of cardinals who dragged him into a helicopter. I have no idea where they went from there. That's above my pay grade. She was at my wedding and with me when my kids were born. She's only ever touched each one of them one time when they were newborns. She brushed them with the tips of her sleeves just the once and never did it again. She's not really comfortable with kids, which is odd to me given how we met. But since I had my own, we both agreed we wouldn't take too many jobs that involved children. Is she a monster? Maybe. I used to ask her that, and her answer changed a lot. Not today, she told me once. I'm a banshee, she said one day, and followed that with an ear-piercing shriek. I don't think so. How rude. I don't ask you that. Yes, of course. What's a monster? Ah, a human. I don't ask her too many questions anymore. Maybe I don't want to know. But that's if. People ask about her now that I've started talking about what I do. I can see monsters and I can make them go to sleep. She helps. She's right here now. You can see her if you'd like to try. Just turn off your screen and angle it over your left shoulder. If she wants you to see her, she'll be right there. She always is for me.